Hi everybody, I'm really delighted to welcome you all to our Open Grants briefing event. My name is Shahid Malvi, Head of Grants at Leeds Community Foundation, which basically means that I manage and oversee all the different grant programs at the foundation, together with a small but highly capable grants team who I'm going to introduce now. So if I can invite my team to maybe unmute and introduce themselves. Maybe Helena, you want to go first?
Hello everyone, my name is Helena. I'm one of the grants officers here at Leeds Community Foundation, and I manage various programmes for Leeds and Bradford.
Fantastic. And Alex?
Hi everyone, yeah, I'm Alex Kupis. I'm also one of the grants officers at Leeds Community Foundation.
And Aaron?
Hi, I'm Aaron Fulton. I'm also a grants officer. I'm the newest member of the team, so I don't recognise a huge number of faces, but it's good to see a lot of you here.
Fantastic. So that's our grants team, and there are another couple of colleagues of ours from Leeds Community Foundation. So Rachel, do you want to just quickly introduce yourself?
Hi everyone, I'm Rachel. I organise all the events. Yeah.
Cool. And Michael?
Hi everyone, I'm Michael Sellers and I'm the Marketing Executive for Leeds Community Foundation. I manage the social media and website. Okay,
fantastic. So in terms of the running order for today, we're going to be telling you a little bit about Leeds Community Foundation, obviously, and our work in the city and with the third sector in particular. We're going to talk a little bit and tell you about our open grants programs, which are open now or about to open in the next few months, which will be of interest to you, obviously. Then we'll take you through some kind of guidance, some general guidance in terms of criteria, application process, the evaluation process, and how that all works, so you can see how to apply and what happens once your application has been submitted. And then lastly, there'll be a Q&A. So I'd actually invite people as we're going through the presentation to note any questions they might have in the chat as well. So we can collate those at the end and we can kind of respond to those. But obviously you'll also have an opportunity, if you wish, to ask a question directly during the Q&A. So moving on, Rachel. Is it moving? Yeah, here we are. So Leeds Community Foundation, so it's part of a broader network of community foundations, which we call UKCF. That's the UK Community Foundations Network. And as you can see, there are 46 community foundations across the UK. And we're quite a sizable funder as a network. So, you know, since the foundation began, we've actually dispersed over £1 billion of grant funding to local projects in communities across the UK. We also have an endowment, which currently stands at £692 million, which is kind of managed centrally by the UKCF headquarters in London. And that's kind of distributed on a kind of pro rata basis based on, you know, per head of the population for each area. So kind of Leeds gets a particular share based on the amount of people in the district. But obviously, as well as that, we also kind of, you know, do our own fundraising through businesses and trusts and charities and foundations and individuals as well. So last year, £98 million was given out in grants across the UK through the network. I think for Leeds, it's somewhere around 4 million. So just in Leeds, Leeds Community Foundation gave out around £4 million. And combined, the community foundations are the fourth largest UK grant maker in terms of Leeds Community Foundation. It's the largest independent grant maker across the Yorkshire and Humber. Okay, move on. Here we are. So in terms of what community foundations do, it's basically three things. So first of all, we try to kind of increase philanthropy in an area by encouraging businesses and private donors to kind of give money locally to local projects. Secondly, once we've got the money in, we obviously do grant making, which is our bread and butter activity. And we have kind of systems and processes in place which would help us to kind of, you know, distribute that money efficiently and make sure it gets to, you know, those particular projects which are supporting local people in neighbourhoods. And thirdly, we kind of build up local intelligence and research in a particular area. So for Leeds, for example, we collate and analyze data from our grant making. We do surveys. We partner up with different sort of organizations and partners to build up a picture of what the particular needs are or what the priorities and themes are in Leeds that need addressing. And then those kind of feed into the design of future grant programs, which then act as a vehicle for addressing some of those issues. Moving on. Obviously, it hasn't escaped anybody's attention that we've been in a global pandemic recently. So obviously we've been locked down since the 23rd of March. I actually, funnily enough, started my post in April. So I've actually been in lockdown since the whole time that I've been at the foundation. But we were quite lucky in the sense that during this particularly challenging period for the sector, the foundation were able to secure some significant funding from government through the NET, which is the National Emergencies Trust, through UKCF, which we then kind of distributed to small local organizations which were involved in kind of more immediate emergency response type activities. So, distributing food parcels, sort of delivering medication, setting up some online kind of befriending schemes and, Zoom calls, etc., so that people can keep in touch with their kind of beneficiaries while they've been in lockdown, I guess. So that was around about £1 million or just over £1 million distributed across Leeds and Bradford to around 72, I think, organisations. And then we had the Resilience Fund, which is just closing at the moment. So we've had all the applications in, we've just done all the assessments. There's going to be around 70 organisations that we fund through that. But this is more about kind of recovery as well. So not just the immediate activities and projects that organisations are keen to keep going, but also allowing them the space and time to kind of reflect on their delivery model, whether that needs adapting in light of COVID, looking at their business planning, fundraising and income generation strategies, maybe bringing external people in to help them with that. They're looking at their governance, that kind of thing. So that's just closed at the moment. But what will be of interest to you guys is that there's some new funding which might be coming in the next week or two, actually. Some money that we've got from DCMS, which is the Department for Culture, Media and Sports, and that's kind of focused on infrastructure support. So support for organisations that are involved in providing infrastructure to the third sector and in light of COVID-19 again. And we're also working to secure further funding as part of the COVID response and get some more kind of recovery grants. And that's imminent, so we actually need to get that money out of the door by 8th of October, I think, and the money needs to be spent by 31st of March next year. So you'll probably see something on the Open Grants portal of the website maybe next week or the week after. So in terms of this particular briefing, obviously we've done all the COVID stuff for now in terms of the funds that we've got and distributed them. So this briefing is mainly about our business as usual, non-COVID related day-to-day project type grant programs, and which make Leeds a fantastic place to live in and work in. And our approach has always been that we've been, pretty flexible with our grantees. So people have come back to us and said, they need to change the timeline in terms of delivery because of COVID, and they weren't able to do the face-to-face activities. So we've been quite flexible around even people starting their projects or making adaptations because they need to transfer some of their delivery online rather than face-to-face, etc. So obviously nobody knows what's going to happen over the next month or two, and we might be back in lockdown, or there might be a second spike or whatever. But we're always flexible, and we probably will ask you in the application about how you might kind of address that. If we don't and circumstances change, you're always welcome to contact us, and we'll be quite open to having that conversation at that point. So I'm going to hand over now to Helena, who's going to take you through some general information about our sort of grant making application process and criteria.
Thank you, Shahid.
Right.
Hi, so we're just going to do a general overview of our application process and I guess the sort of life cycle of our grants. And they are for all of our grants programs as well. So the current open grants that we have open and will be launching very soon. These are the logos for the funds, but just to go through them, we have Haribo Fund, which is quite a big one in partnership with the Haribo confectionery brand. And we also have High Sheriff, Flint Family Fund, working with some of our donors. We're working with Leeds City Council for Stay Well This Winter. We also have a new fund opening soon called the Moen Westlake Foundation. And we also have Wesleyan and the Community Partnering Fund and Ideas That Change Lives, and also the Leeds Fund. So they're just a sort of idea about the open grants that we have coming up, and we'll go into a bit more detail about those later in the presentation. It's just worth noting as well that different officers or different members of the team will manage different programs, so your contact may not be the same for each program. But it's just it's a way for us to share ideas and go through your projects with you as well. So who can apply? With Leeds Community Foundation, we're open for applications to from community groups, charities, social enterprises, or other charitable organisations from the third sector. These groups and organisations, to be eligible to apply for the funding, you must have a constitution or another relevant governance document. If an organisation is a CIC, then we would ask as one of our criteria that not one person should have significant control as on Companies House. So we can go into a bit more detail of that as well with the mandatory documents. We would ask that all groups that apply to us have a management committee or a board of directors or trustees of at least 3 unrelated people. And also that you must have a bank account under the name of the group with at least 2 unrelated signatories. There may be other criteria items depending on the programme. So it may be a geography one, so maybe it's a fund that's only open in Leeds, or maybe it covers more broadly for West Yorkshire. There may be a criteria element about the financial income for groups. So maybe we'll only fund, if we're trying to target smaller groups, we may put a cap on the annual income that an organisation must have. We may also ask that relevant policies be provided and they should be in place. So if it's a programme that's working with young people, we'll ask for safeguarding for children and young people, or vulnerable adults policy as well if it's working with vulnerable people in the community. We can also fund faith-based organisations. And one of our criteria items is that we do welcome applications from faith organisations, but we would ask that the project would be open to all. Thanks, Rachel. Can I have the next slide, please? So I'll just take you through the application process, which is standard across our programmes. So the full information, the criteria, the link to the application form, it's all available on our website. We would highly recommend that you read the full criteria on the webpage before applying. And then if you have any questions, you can ask us about that. The online application form, once you register, it will send you a link to that application form by email. And any supporting documents, they should be attached at the end of the application. Our application forms do have word counts, and they can vary depending on the size of the grant available. So the maximum is really a guideline, and we do advise to use the Save as Draft button so that you don't lose any of your work whilst you're going through the application. And then when you're finished, once you've completed it, you just press submit, and then that'll come straight to us and you'll get a notification to say that it's been submitted. Again, you can discuss your project with us, and do feel free to contact us. I know we're not in the office at the moment, but we are still here by email, and we can still do phone calls as well. So if you do have any specific project queries, then we are here to help. Once an application has been submitted, so the final step, we'll acknowledge the receipt of your application again by email, and then we will assess your application within the grants team. We may contact you if we do have any questions about your application, or we just need to check about something in the application. And we also may contact, if you're new to us, we may contact for a reference. if your application is shortlisted, it will then be submitted to the awards panel for further consideration. Thank you. And the next slide, we'll move on to the criteria. So as I've mentioned, each programme will have specific themes and focus. They may have specific priorities as well. So yeah, advice is read the criteria. And I guess just a tip as well is ensure your idea and your existing provisions match the fund's themes and focus. So for example, if it's a youth programme, then you already should be working with young people, or if not, there should be partnerships or ways that you can reach those beneficiaries. They may have maybe demographics as well, so you could always read it criteria through and see if your idea fits in with that. You could potentially tweak your project as long as you don't sort of lose the essence of what you're trying to do and your existing provisions as well. And then we would advise to plan your project really carefully, and I guess think about what you would like to do, and does it meet the aims of the fund that you're applying to, and how much will it cost as well. And then in the need and the issues in those communities, what is the need that you would like to address with your project? And then how will you reach and engage with the target beneficiaries? So that could be partnerships or referrals. And again, just refer back to the criteria to check that the beneficiaries that you will reach are the ones that the fund wishes to target as well. I think with the project part of the criteria as well, it would be to be quite specific. So when you're writing your project plan, just sort of, I guess, what's the need that you'd like to address? What would you like to do? How much will it cost? What will the outcomes be? And how you will measure and capture that impact. You can also use statistical data if you want to show the need or issues in an area. So you could use index of deprivation. You could also use your own experience and your own knowledge of the communities that you work in, and just highlight that as well within your application. Especially at the moment, if you're seeing a peak in demand, or if you've noticed that maybe your provisions have changed, you could also include that as well in the application. The grant amount will vary depending on the programme. There usually is a minimum grant amount and a maximum grant amount. Match funding can be included for the majority of our programmes, but it's definitely worth just to check the criteria, because often there may be a priority that the funders would like the grant to represent at least 50% of the total project cost. So that's not for all programmes, but it is for the majority. There may be as well that maybe a fund wants to specifically target smaller organisations. So they just, I guess, the grant amount that you're requesting should also be in line with the grants that you're used to managing, and that you have the staff or the volunteers to be able to manage that grant too. And then the final part for the criteria is attach mandatory documents. So the mandatory documents for each of our funds are a constitution or a relevant governance document, a list of management committee, board of directors or trustees of at least 3 unrelated people. And there should be a sentence there just to say that none are related or live at the same address. And the most recent financial accounts as well. And they should be within 18 months from the moment that you submit the application. Thank you. So if we go to the next slide, please. So this is just a general overview of the life cycle of a grants programme, just to sort of give you an idea about the process that's involved. So the step 1 is the exciting part when we launch the programme. The programme tends to stay open for applications for around 6 weeks. That can vary, but our sort of standard turnaround time is usually 6 weeks. So it's enough time for you to ask any queries and think about your project, and then submit your application. The number 2, it'll be open for applications, and then number 3, it moves on to the assessment phase, This usually takes around 3 to 4 weeks. We may contact you if we have any questions within that time about your application. And then the panel is the next step on 4, and that's where we would send all the applications to an independent panel to consider. And then the next part is the notification of decisions. If you're successful, you would receive an email with a funding agreement attached for you to print and sign. There may be additional conditions as well that have been set by the panel, so that'll be explained within the content of the email as well. And the grant should be spent, depending on some of our funding programmes, our standard is usually around 12 months from the date that the letter of the, the funding agreement is. So the grants awarded, that's when we start making the payments. So just to give you an idea for project planning, that's typically around 12 weeks. But again, it can change, it could be shorter, it could be longer, but that's our standard turnaround time is 12 weeks. And then we go through to project delivery, where you guys deliver all the amazing work and for the beneficiaries in our communities. And then we do a reporting and evaluation, which is usually at the end of the project, maybe a year after the grant has been made. So that's just to give you an idea of the life cycle that that each grant programme goes through. In the next slide, we'll go through the decision-making process. And this is, again, just want to be transparent with you so that you get an understanding about our decision panels and how we make sure that our decisions are fair. So Leeds Community Foundation, for each of our programmes, we will recruit an independent panel for each fund. And we do that by liaising with the fund holders and other relevant partners, maybe the council or donors. We also work to ensure that our decision panels are fair and diverse. We usually prefer to have 5 or more panel members so that there's fair voices around the table. And we really seek to make sure that our panel, that the considerations and the discussions, that they're representative of the third sector, the communities we serve, and the specific aims of that funding programme. So we try to make sure that somebody is there from the third sector, maybe somebody with a bit of life experience and maybe can relate to some of the issues in the application. And if it's a young youth programme, maybe a young person as well, so that they can give their insight and their perspective. The panel's role is to bring an understanding of local and strategic issues, so that we have all of the sort of relevant discussions and that we're making the right decisions with the funding, so that it meets those people that really do need it. Final decisions are agreed by a majority vote. So everyone will have a chance to say something, and then maybe if there's a 50-50 split, we'll do a majority vote where the chair will, I guess, have the overall say. But we make sure that everybody has a say in the decisions. LCF staff, mainly the grants team or sometimes our senior managers, they're also present at the panel meeting to support and facilitate the panel members in terms of making the decisions in relation to the criteria of the programme. So they'll be there to answer any questions that the panel may have, record decisions and record feedback. Most of our funds do tend to be oversubscribed. I think that's the nature of the sector at the moment, but we are very aware that, you know, we know that you've put in a lot of hard work into submitting an application, preparing the project proposal, and so we do definitely always strive to make sure that we give constructive feedback for all applicants. So whether you're successful or unsuccessful, we want to make sure that you've had, you know, that you've received some good feedback there too. So that's our decision-making process. Next slide is our reporting and evaluation. With reporting and evaluation, we do ask that you think about that at the moment when you're deciding and I guess creating your project, to think about the monitoring and evaluation at that stage. But I guess in terms of the process part, it comes after grants have been made. So the monitoring end of grant report templates for each of our funds, they're available on our website. If you go to our website and then go under our grants monitoring, you'll find a list of all of our funding programmes. So template's there for you to download, and then you can populate that with your evaluation information. We are particularly keen to be able to understand the impact as a result of the grant being made. This is really good learning for us, and it helps us understand what's happening in the communities, what's happening in the sector, and also it helps shape our funding programmes for either future rounds or maybe upcoming new programmes as well that we're creating with our partners. So it's really good for us to read that and see what's happening on the ground. We want to understand what the impact has been for beneficiaries and how many people have been supported and helped. All organisations awarded a grant, they will be expected to complete an end of grant report. And that captures information on what you have achieved, what you have learned, and what the outcomes have been. In some cases, there may be an interim report as well. And just to mention that the monitoring, it's not like a test or anything. It's an opportunity to be very honest and just explain if there's any learning or if there's any feedback for us as well. And yeah, then we do think about learning. How will learning be evidenced and demonstrated? Again, I guess that's at the grant application stage and then to the evaluation part as well. So we ask that you consider the project's planned outcomes, success measures, and how the outcomes and impacts will be captured. You can include evaluation costs within your project budget as well. So if that's an internal staff member that you would like, that's fine as well. Or if you'd like to have an external consultant to do the evaluation part, that's also fine to include within the budget too. There are different evaluation tools that you may wish to use. Just to give you some examples, there's qualitative case studies or quantitative pre and post questionnaires. We do like case studies because then it paints a real individual picture sort of behind the numbers, those stories and that positive impact that we want to see in our communities. You may want to provide beneficiaries feedback quotes, photographs or video links, and we just ask that you ensure that you've got the right permission to share as well, if there are photographs or names and things like that. And that is the reporting and evaluation. So that's just an overview of our grants process. I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Alex Kupis, who will be able to go through some of the open programmes that we have. So Alex, I'm going to hand over to you.
Great, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. So I will be talking about the following programmes that we have open currently and that are upcoming. So we have Wesleyan Large Grants, the Haribo Happiness Fund, Ideas That Change Lives, the Flint Family Fund, and Moan Westlake. So firstly, we have the Wesleyan Large Grants. So this round of funding is focusing on 3 areas. So the first one is education, so charities or projects that enhance learning or develop career opportunities. The second one is health, so organisations that promote health and well-being. And the final area is social, so providing local solutions for local needs, promoting community cohesion, and developing sustainable and supportive communities. In addition, during this time, Wesleyan would also like to support organisations focusing on some of these areas as well, which is mental health for all age groups, isolation, social prescribing, and outdoor projects. And there's a full list of other areas that they can support on the criteria document, and including top tips as well for applying for this specific fund. The grant size for this fund is £2,000 to £10,000, and it is currently open for applications with the closing date on the 27th of August at 12 noon. So the next fund that I'll be talking about is the Haribo Happiness Fund. So this fund is looking to support projects that are creating moments of childlike happiness through intergenerational activities to enable people to have a happier and more fulfilled life. So the aims of this fund is to bring people together to take part in engaging activities that they would not otherwise have the opportunity to access and or enjoy, to strengthen communities by bringing people together who wouldn't necessarily interact with each other, and as it said before, to bring generations together to create better connections across all age ranges. So applicants can apply for up to 5,000 for 1-year projects or 10,000 for 2-year projects. And again, this is currently open with a closing date again of the 27th of August at 12 noon. So next we have the Ideas That Change Live programme, which offers business guidance and financial investment to help organisations develop socially enterprising ideas to support people in Leeds with care and support needs. This fund focuses on making a real impact with older people, people with learning disabilities, physical disabilities or sensory impairment, people with mental health needs, long-term health conditions, carers as well. So the fund for this that's currently open is the Kickstart Investments, and these will focus on socially enterprising activities that can become financially sustainable beyond the investment process, either through generating income, charging or being commissioned. So types of funding that can be given is to carry out research, setting up pilot or feasibility studies, accessing expertise and consultancy. With this fund, we strongly recommend that you talk about your idea with either a member of Leeds Community Foundation or See Ahead, and those details are provided in the criteria document online on the website. The closing date for this is the 20th of August. The next fund is the Flint Family Fund. So this is focusing on supporting disadvantaged children and young people aged 5 to 25 in Leeds through supporting in either a good education for all and removing barriers, especially with improving literacy skills, or creating opportunities to engage children and young people in sport to encourage lifelong passions, interests, and raising aspirations for future careers and dreams. The minimum request for this grant is 2,500, and it is a maximum of 5,000 for 1 year or 10,000 for 2 years. This programme will open on the 8th of September and with a closing date of the 27th of August. And finally, the last fund I will be speaking about is Moan Westlake. So the Moan Westlake Arts Education Fund supports projects engaging young people between 5 and 25 years old in art and the arts who are or have perceived to be excluded or disengaged from these opportunities. The fund will be separated into small and large grants, which allows for multi-year funding. For the small grants, it will be up to between 500 and 2,500, and for large grants between 2,500 and 10,000 per year. This is due to launch on the 29th of September, with the closing date of the 17th of November. And there will be a separate briefing event for this fund later on. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. So they're the programmes that Alex manages. I'm going to hand over to my colleague Aaron Fulton, who will be going through the next programmes that we have open and coming up. Thank you.
Thank you, Helena. So I've got 3 more programmes to talk to you about. I've got Stay Well This Winter, which is open currently, and then Community Partnering Fund and the High Share Fund, which are opening soon. Just as a reminder, this is quite a quick run through of the grant, so if you've got any specific questions, feel free to pop them in the chat and we'll pick them up in the FAQs at the end. So Rachel, if we could move on to Stay Well This Winter. So Stay Well This Winter is a fund that where we work with Leeds City Council Public Health, and we're looking to fund community-based projects, generally supporting vulnerable people who are most at risk of becoming unwell over winter due to cold and severe weather. The fund is really keen to build on a lot of the amazing innovation that we've had in the sector over the last few months. So build on some of the stuff that people have been doing around COVID-19, particularly looking for projects that increase resilience and self-care or reduce loneliness, or support people in cold housing. And the, sort of following on from the COVID-19 situation, it's looking for people, particular priority for people who are shielded, so people who have been shielded over the last few months. yeah, so this is grants of £500 to £2,500. If they're a local project, and if they're across the whole city, then it'd be up to £5,000. As I say, currently open and closing in 9th of September. Just a couple of examples of projects that we're expecting. So things like food delivery, digital inclusion, mentoring or befriending schemes, and projects that increase vitamin D uptake or the number of people getting flu vaccinations. There are a few sort of specifics in the criteria for things that we will only fund if they are sort of a smaller part of the project. So that's one to probably have a look at after this. If we could move on to the next one, Rachel. So the Community Partnering Fund is one that isn't currently open. It's one that's coming up soon. So we're still sort of in conversations about exactly what this will look like. So yes, we don't have final confirmation, but so it's subject to change. But this fund works with Northern Gas Networks and Northern Power Grid. So it's generally projects that are relevant to them as a utility company. So it's things like tackling fuel poverty, the dangers of carbon monoxide, poisoning, encouraging interest in STEM, so science, technology, engineering, and maths, getting people signed up to the Priority Services Register, and also community energy projects. So the grants are for between £1,000 and £10,000, but priority for small grants. That's what it's been in the most recent rounds, but again, that might change, so that's something to keep your eye on. And also the geography of this is not just for Leeds, so it's across all of Northern England in sort of specific areas. So again, that's one to sort of check back on our website if that's one you're interested in looking at. And that should be opening in around October, we think. And the last one, if we could move on to the High Sheriff of West Yorkshire Fund. So the Office of High Sheriff is an independent, non-political royal appointment that happens for a single year. So we've worked with the High Sheriff over a number of years, also with the Police and Crime Commissioner and the Chief Constable of West Yorkshire. And the idea of the fund is generally to encourage youth projects that combat crime, or generally sort of young people working to make their communities safer. So these grants are quite small again, so £500 to £2,500. Again, the area is a bit wider than just Leeds, so it's across West Yorkshire. Previously funded projects have included performing arts and social action projects, or youth groups working with the local police and councils to discuss the effects of crime and antisocial behaviour, and also outdoor activity to keep young people engaged and off the streets. So again, fairly broad understanding of what combating crime means there. So if you've got any further questions on any of those, feel free to shout, but I'll hand back to Helena.
Thank you, Aaron. So we'll open up the space now for Q&As, questions. We'll go through the ones that you've popped in the chat. If there are any quite more questions where it's a bit more in-depth or it's quite specific, we can arrange a phone call with you as well if you'd like, and discuss, a project idea or something. But yeah, let's get started.
Brilliant, thank you, Helena. So I have a few from the chat. The first one is just a general one. Is this PowerPoint available on email?
We're going to be sharing the video actually afterwards, after the event, if everybody wants it, but I'll also share the presentation as well, so yes.
Brilliant, thank you. Second one, if you missed the expression of interest for the Ideas That Changed Live development grants, is it going to be repeated?
So with the expressions of interest, they have closed for this round. I believe they closed on the 20th of July, and we're not looking to open that up again for this round. So it would just be the Kickstart grants that are open at the moment.
Great, thank you very much. Next question. I missed out on the second Healthy Holidays funding round as I was on leave from work. Which open grant would you suggest for a similar project?
I was thinking maybe the Haribo. It's working with young people. And Mow and Westlake as well. But I know that one's quite centred around arts, but I know in Healthy Holidays you could do an art activity and then there's a food provision. So I would recommend maybe looking at Mow and Westlake and the Haribo Happiness Fund. You may need to tweak it a little bit though from the Healthy Holidays idea so that it fits into that fund. But things like equipment or materials as well, you can include that within the budget for Mow and Westlake and Haribo as well.
Great, thank you, Helena. And the last question from the chat at the moment is, the Wesleyan Foundation states that they would like to support organisations and charities that focus on supporting Black, African, Caribbean communities following the recent Black Lives Matter conversations. Does this exclude organisations that are not focusing on supporting these communities?
No, it shouldn't exclude. I think they've just stated that they do encourage applications from these communities as well as from others, so I don't think there should be any exclusions at all.
Great. I've just got another question through from the chat actually relating to the Ideas That Change Lives. Vic asks, is it going to happen next year?
Honestly, I'm not actually too sure yet. We've got some conversations with the partners to see what the next round might look like.
Great, thank you, Alex. So now we're going to open out to the rest of the chat. If anyone has any questions at all, want to raise their hands or put it into the chat.
Thank you, Michael. And we would advise as well maybe to sign up to our newsletter as well, where open grants will be there too. So there were conversations and discussions with donors and partners, so next year will be interesting, but it's always being updated.
Absolutely, yeah. Another question relating to Healthy Holidays. It's in response to the previous query. So the main delivery would be healthy eating, sports participation and reducing ASB. Obviously we spoke about the Haribo Happiness Fund. Is there any sort of grants that would relate specific to that aside from Healthy Holidays?
Not that I know of at the moment. No, I think maybe Haribo and Mow and Westlake, and I think when I'd advise to read through the criteria, and then if you would like to have a conversation with one of us about a project, then we could sort of work around that and see if we could make it a good application to make.
Great, thank you, Helena. Another question, any idea when your microgrants program will be restarting?
Yeah, so I can take that one. So we've had a sort of a specific issue with our microgrants program in that one of the requirements for the microgrants is that people come into the office to collect a check, which obviously hasn't been possible when we haven't been in the office at all. So we're in the process of trying to change our systems and get them approved through our trustees. So we're in process and we're trying to get it back as quickly as possible. We're still accepting applications, and so we will have like one big sort of panel process to pick up all of the applications that we've received over the last few months. But it's really just it's a sort of a logistical issue that at the minute we're the way our grant is set up, we're not allowed to just make bank payments. So we're working on it and we're doing as much as we can, but so we're hoping to open it as soon as possible.
Great, thank you very much for that, Aaron. Is there any other questions from anybody at all? I've got another one here. Any other grants RE Resilience / core funding available?
Not at the moment. We are still having those conversations. I believe Shahid was speaking about it earlier. So we've not got anything sort of concrete planned out yet, but we are sort of having conversations with councils and local authorities about funding, because I know it may seem like the pandemic's easing, but it's not really. So just bear with us, but there is some money coming, and we'll be announcing that as soon as we've got everything finalised.
I suppose the other thing to say is that this is talking specifically about programs that are either currently open or are going to open imminently. And I think we don't like to talk too much about what might happen in a few months' time, because the whole environment can change quite quickly. So I think my understanding is that we're planning to hold these events sort of quarterly. So I think this is one where you can check back in and see what's available in a few months' time.
Great, thank you. Another question. We are registered in London and we want to know if we can apply for any of the grants we have available.
Each programme will be quite specific, so I would advise to, whichever programme you're interested in, I would say to read the criteria, and then at the part when it says who can apply, it's in that section that it should say you can either be based in or supporting people living in Leeds. So again, it's not standard for all of our programmes, it would depend, but usually if it does say must be based in or supporting people living in the Leeds Metropolitan District, then yes, you would be able to apply for that fund, even though you're based in London. But it would just depend on the programme.
I would also add with that actually as well that if you are supporting people in Leeds but you're based in London or somewhere else in the country, is to demonstrate that in the application of how you would support the beneficiaries in Leeds as well.
Brilliant, thank you very much both. What grants would best suit supporting elderly people with combating loneliness?
I think the Ideas That Change Lives programme would help with that one. It is a bit more of a specific grant programme as well, so I think reading criteria would definitely be a good starting point to see if your idea fits within the general themes, but also Wesleyan large grants as well. They've opened it to look at health and loneliness as well.
And I would also just add that Stay Well This Winter, so it'd be shorter term funding for over the winter, but loneliness is definitely something that is covered in that programme as well. So that's one you can take a look at.
Brilliant. Can an organisation apply to more than one LCF fund at any one time for different projects / beneficiaries?
Yes, that's fine. As long as you feel that you have the capacity to manage multiple different projects, then that's fine as well. And as long as there's no duplication either, then that's okay.
Great. Another question. We are a small mental health prevention and small charity not currently registered with the Charity Commission. Can we apply?
Should I take that one? Yeah, so you don't have to be registered with the Charity Commission. I think we suggest that if your income is over £5,000 that you do register with the Charity Commission. But that's something that kind of maybe depends on exactly the size of your organisation. It's maybe something we could have a discussion about if you wanted to get in contact with us. I think it's probably the best way to talk about that one.
Great. A question regarding the Haribo Fund, Haribo Happiness Fund. Does activity have to be exclusively for under 25s and over 50s, or can some participants be between those ages? They're looking to apply for a dance/movement activity to take place outdoors at Meanwood Farm.
So in the criteria it states that the intergenerational refers to a combination of older people, which they've set as 50 plus, and young people up to 25 years old. So I think it could cover anyone up to that age and then over as well for older people. I think as long as I think the majority are from either or, I think that would be okay.
Great. So another question, do you know if DCMS funding will require match funding?
I don't think we have that information at the moment. That might be one just to wait and see. But yeah, if we do, then it'll be in the criteria.
Great, thank you. Yeah, that was one that Shahid mentioned at the beginning of the meeting. So yeah.
Sorry, we're just waiting for everything to be finalised, and then we'll be able to answer queries a bit more in depth.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Is there any other questions from anybody else at all? Can't see any hands raised, so I'll just double check. There's quite a lot of yes. I'll just have a sweep over and see any hands are raised at all. Doesn't look like there is. Yeah, I think that's the questions done for now. If you have any specific questions, please email grants@leedscf.org.uk. You'll have got your own email then. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you everyone for joining us today as well, and for participating in our first Zoom briefing event. So yeah, massive thanks to everybody. And if you do have any questions as well, just direct them to the grants inbox, where me, Alex or Aaron will be able to pick up your query and have more an in-depth conversation with you if needed. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thanks everyone.